The Premier League is back, a summer of football and Olympic sport behind us, but it's now time to put all our hopes and dreams in the hands of 11 men kicking around a sphere. We are back. This is the 1-2. How's it going, everyone? And welcome back to the 1-2. This is episode 6. And of course, this is our annual Premier League predictions episode. I say annual. It's the only episode we got through last year, but now we're 6 in. So on a bit of a run, aren't we, Olan? How you doing today, my man?
I'm good, Rahul. My eyes are still red from crying from that final, but we carry on. It's a new season. Hopefully trophies are in the air for us all and not just Manchester United and City. So let's see where it goes.
On today, August 14th, the Wednesday before Manchester United kicks off the Premier League season, we can agree, wish both of us, all of us, much fortune in the year to come ahead. But that's right, folks. Premier League right around the corner. And we thought we'd go through, first hit on the major transfers that have happened, get all of our fans caught up on the comings and goings of the Premier League, and then get into some Premier League predictions. We'll go size up the table, give our favorites, our mid-table fades, our surprise packages, what have you. We'll cover all the players we need to know as well. All that coming for you live on the 1-2. So hold on, without further ado, let's get right into the transfers. I see you picked one near and dear to my heart, and shit, that's the other one. Quite literally on the shirt. Matthias De Ligt has completed a move from Bayern Munich to Manchester United. A bit of a saga, long drawn out. His club teammate, Noussair Mazraoui, the Moroccan international, has also joined De Ligt from Bayern to Manchester United. This deal was also kind of predicated on Aaron Wan-Bissaka leaving the club and heading to West Ham. What have you made of this series of moves, starting with De Ligt and working your way down?
It's a pretty good price for two players, honestly. Yes, De Ligt has not become the player many thought 5 years ago he would become, but he's still definitely a quality international level player. Mazraoui is a great right back in his own right. The only thing I will say is I feel like even though he's in the last year of his contract, as you texted to me earlier, Aaron Wan-Bissaka for only £15 million, not ideal.
Yeah, definitely not ideal. Feels like a cut rate fee for a player who, we'll say he's limited. That's a fact. But at one aspect of his game is absolutely locked down, elite. I would say
best in the world.
Best in the world. I mean, it's set so by the likes of Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville. Do they know ball? That's for you to decide. But really a quality player. So I agree with you on the fee. But it did sound like United needed to sell Wan-Bissaka to raise the funds to complete these moves. There almost had one David Ornstein tweet that listed all three moves. A kind of bomba that's rare in the Fabrizio Romano era. Moving on to De Ligt, you brought it up. It's a player that 5 years ago in that Ajax team under Erik ten Hag, this was the crown jewel of European football, right? Especially at the center back position. Moved to Juventus that summer for big money. Didn't really kick on. He was in and out of a team that admittedly had some veterans like Chiellini and Bonucci in it. Didn't really establish himself, and eventually chose to make the move to Bayern Munich. A similar sort of fee. We're talking about 60 to 70 million for both of those moves individually, right? Bayern Munich has always been a weird kind of feeling around the fact that they're letting De Ligt leave. I think we've talked about this before, but kind of the talk that De Ligt was slated to be like 4th or 5th choice. They wanted to get him out to get Jonathan Tah in. My real question is, I'm not really sure what level to expect from De Ligt. Like, what would you come in and put him, I don't know, top 10 center back in the league from day one?
The thing that's really concerning with De Ligt is that he seems to be the same player he was 5 years ago. He moves to Italy, and as you mentioned, Bonucci and Chiellini, two veterans are there. But in a very tactical league, his lack of positional awareness defensively gets exposed. His lack of ability on the ball gets exposed. So already he goes from being a £70 million signing to a £60 million signing in Munich, where he was first choice quite often, but was taken out of the team a couple times last year by Thomas Tuchel. He's always had the same problems he's had. So let's see if in the hardest league in the world, he can actually fix these issues.
Yeah, I think you're really spot on with your assessment. One thing too I saw with De Ligt really over the years from that kind of, albeit still captain of that Ajax team, right? But kind of a skinny frame into a very imposing figure. This is a big lad, right? This is a huge man. So he's going to bring some, for me, much needed physicality to United. I felt that United were too often bullied by teams with less technical ability than the likes of a Manchester United. So I think that's going to be a good addition. His mentality is going to be huge. Suddenly that spine of Lisandro Martinez and De Ligt is going to have a lot of, kind of the balls, right, to win games and to drag teammates and not to let the standards slip. And the last aspect, we'll get into this with Mazraoui too. I mean, just look at all of the Ajax players that are at the club. If you go with the back four and keeper, that's 4 of the 5. Onana, Mazraoui, De Ligt, and Lisandro Martinez. United, of course, also signed Antony, who, we don't expect to be a starter. Check out the Manchester United squad preview that we did release a couple of weeks ago. That'll get our really in-depth thoughts on the situation. But yeah, I mean, do you kind of give it a plus in the column because he's worked with the manager before? Do you think those intangibles are what United need?
He's basically a deluxe Maguire, and I'm not saying that to slag off Harry Maguire. I think he definitely played all right last year. He's just a really ideal partner for Lisandro Martinez. He's everything he's not, and Martinez is everything De Ligt is not. Now, how will that impede Euro when he comes back? Even though he's out for 3 months, I believe, and he might be a bit injury prone and a bit young and might want to bring him in slowly to the Premier League. That will add a question mark come wintertime.
Yeah. United suffered from terrible injury problems. I mean, some of the back fours that we're putting out towards the end of the season were just, comical. It was like Casemiro, Evans center back partnerships, right? Wow. And now to have Lisandro had his injury issues. Euro is currently injured, and the De Ligt is a new signing. So hard to say yet, but on paper, 3 reliable, at the very least, center back. So I think it's definitely a good bit of business. And Mazraoui is a versatile fullback position we definitely needed some cover in. So moving on to our next transfer. This is really the biggest fee involved in the Premier League transfer so far this summer. That is Julian Alvarez leaving Manchester City to Atletico Madrid, up to 95 million euros with the add-ons, if I'm not mistaken. Tell me your thoughts on that move and how it will impact Manchester City.
Well, the biggest shock I had was remembering how much or how little Manchester City paid for Julian Alvarez. It was only £18 million. Mm-hmm. That's incredible, because that piece of business, selling him for that much now, because you do think he will reach his add-ons, unless a lot of them are Champions League winning or La Liga winning clauses, which they very well might be. But it's still an astounding piece of business for City. It's quite a domino effect as well for the Atletico squad.
Yeah. I've never seen Alvarez as that 95 million player, but it's maybe hard to say when you're only paying 90 minutes every other week. He, of course, was an integral part of that World Cup run for the Argentina team. So Julian Alvarez, an exciting player, no doubt, but staying with Atletico Madrid, and these are about some transfers that have not happened yet, may not end up happening. One that you will certainly be an expert on. Take me through this whole saga surrounding Conor Gallagher, Samu Omorodion. Excuse me, Samu, if I butchered that. And, of course, Joao Felix.
So Hey Sports is a very late addition to all this drama. Conor Gallagher has been looking for a new home ever since the owners told him he no longer has one at Chelsea. Real shame the way he's been treated. He was stuck in Madrid, medical completed. Everything is signed on his end. Atleti just cannot sign him on for fears of, salary cap issues, for lack of a better word. FIFA or La Liga salary cap rules. I'm not exactly sure of what their term is, but they need to sell a player. Originally, Omorodion was supposed to be that guy. Chelsea turns out they don't want to pay that much money for a completely unproven player, thank God. I was actually quite upset by this news. And to say Hey Sports, Joao Felix once back again in blue, possibly, that'd be a great sight. The issue is, I think Madrid wants 60 million for him, something Chelsea's really not willing to pay. So they just need to negotiate and see how that goes.
Do you think this move will get completed? The Gallagher move, at least.
The Gallagher move will only be completed if Chelsea sign an Atletico player, or if Atletico somehow sells a player to someone else. But really, Chelsea and them just have to figure it out in order for Gallagher to leave and bring a profit to Chelsea, and for, I guess, Atletico to do the same thing. It's a bit of a scratch my back and I'll do yours.
Yeah, something that is a kind of deal we've seen quite a lot of this summer, but really a shame how it's ended for Conor Gallagher, who captained the club for long stretches last season. Of course, an academy player. You see these reports of him and Chalobah being barred from the first team dressing. You really never want to see it devolve like that. But unfortunately, football sport more than ever is becoming that kind of business, right? So let's go on to one that Chelsea did complete. I'm very curious to get your thoughts on Pedro Neto, kind of out of the blue, completing a £50 million move from Wolves to Chelsea. What are your thoughts on this one?
What I will say is a great sign is apparently they've been talking for a while, the two clubs, about this transfer, and no one heard anything until the very last minute. That's a sign of decent business. Now, I don't know if the fee is warranted. I mean, 50 million quid and then add-ons for a player who can be really good on his day, but is A, inconsistent, and B, has a history of muscle injuries, and C, in a very crowded wingers room now. I guess you have so many forwards, but still no real center forward outside Nicolas Jackson, unless you plan on playing an 18-year-old Spanish player. I think Chelsea could have done better with a center forward. But for now, I'm still pretty decently satisfied with the signing, even though not necessary. I mean, Chelsea needs to sell 10 players and then loan out another 7. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's opportunistic. I really don't know what the owners are thinking here, once again.
Opportunistic at that fee is hard to say. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, like in a couple of various different aspects. His injury record is really worrying. Well, let me first say, Pedro Neto is quite a good player. He's been linked to a lot of big clubs for many years. He's a good player. The fee with the injury record, but really the fit, because the fee almost in this era, it doesn't really matter. You know, mediocre players, not saying that Neto is, but mediocre players go for a lot of money, right? But the fit is what really puzzled me more. And you said it perfectly. Chelsea just feels like needs that, 20-plus goal a season striker. It's going to have to rest on the shoulders of Nico Jackson. There's still some talks about an Osimhen move, but going back to Neto, do you think Neto works his way into the starting lineup from game week 1?
Well, he's sort of playing catch up as he just joined the club. He only has this week really to figure it out. To me, really, the left winger spot is quite open. There's a reason why they ended up signing him. I mean, neither Mudryk nor Sterling have lit the world alight this summer in pre-season, nor really towards the end of last. So if he does perform in training, there is a chance he plays on the left, unless Nkunku is preferred there, or maybe even Jackson. Everything's a bit up in the air. It's our first official match under Maresca. So we'll see. I mean, there are plenty of movers around the league. We don't know if they're going to start, even if they come for big money.
That's a good way to put it. It was interesting, and you brought him up in the end. Nkunku is someone that I'd penciled in my head as a left winger. We previously talked in the show about perhaps he starts through the middle. He can play behind the striker as well, but that was interesting here. It'll be great to see how it all unfolds. But moving on to our next big money transfer, this one was a center forward, and that is Dominic Solanke moving from Bournemouth to Tottenham Hotspur for £60 million. 65 actually. I think, at least, I'm pretty sure it smashed Tottenham's transfer record, which was previously Tanguy Ndombele. Hopefully for them, it goes a little bit better. Hopefully for us, it doesn't. But tell me about Dominic Solanke.
Another product of La Cobham. Incredible to see him go for this much. Personally, I've never rated him too much. He's a decent player for a lower league or mid-table side. I don't think he has what it takes to lead the line for a top 4 finish. And it seems like he's the guy they're kind of relying on. There's no one really, apart from Richarlison, who seems unwanted, and an aging Son, who can play in that number 9 position. So they really need him to perform.
They really do. I mean, Solanke did have a phenomenal season for Bournemouth, who finished 12th in the Premier League last year. Let's not forget. It's a question: can he make that step up? Spurs. It's interesting. You would say that James Maddison is almost a similar type of move. That player, not yet at a big six club, moving from one English team to another. And maybe that's where they've kind of found their niche. Madison played well up until injury. Spurs, of course, the fans at least led you to believe they were in a title challenge, mate, as the as Big Andrew would have put it. But
then Nico Jackson had something to say about that.
That's a Premier League classic. That's gonna be like a pub trivia question in like 10 years time. that
20.
Yeah. But Solanke did get completed. One that did not get completed. I mean, the guy literally had the jersey on doing interviews on the side of Anfield, and in the end said, no, that is Martin Zubimendi, part of the Spain Euro winning squad, declining a move that was pretty much done. The release clause triggered from Real Sociedad to Liverpool, chose to stay with his boyhood team. He didn't end up making the move, so I'm not sure what the takeaway is here. But Liverpool, no signings yet. I mean, what Zubimendi? I don't know. I have a lot of questions about this one. I just want to take the midfield of Liverpool. Right? It was McAllister, Szoboszlai, and
Endo.
So Endo is usually playing as a 6. It always felt like Zubimendi was a bit of a weird move to me. I don't know. Just what have you thought about maybe that saga, but Liverpool business or lack of business so far this summer?
Well, they definitely are going to suffer some squad depth issues, apart from that goalkeeper, who we'll discuss the signing later. But it seems that everywhere else on the park, they're decently thin. We're not sure how they're going to be now. It's a new era for the club. Some players may be aging out of their prime, such as Van Dijk, Salah, Alisson, even perhaps. So there's a lot of question marks at the club and a lot of sales, honestly. Carvalho's gone. Bradley, I think, just got sold today as well. There's been a couple sales already, but no incomings. The Zubimendi, I guess, fiasco is a bit strange. You don't really expect that out of Liverpool. But the last couple of years, Rahul, we have seen midfielders turn down Liverpool to go to other clubs, or in this case, stay.
To go to other clubs. This one, and it's maybe something that kind of warms the heart of like the football fan, right? For him to stay at his boyhood team instead of making that big money step up to the Premier League. Obviously better for us that it was Liverpool, the one being rejected. But you're absolutely right with Caicedo and Lavia last summer, again in the same area of the park, declining moves. It'll be interesting. We'll get on to Liverpool in a second, but those are the big transfers I kind of had in mind. Any other transfers you want to mention for the fans listening?
I found a quite fun fact. Arsenal's record sale this summer was made. It was Emile Smith-Rowe for only £34 million. He's off to Fulham, where I think he will play decently and have a pretty good time with their front line. But to hear that Arsenal's never sold a player for about 40 million quid is a bit crazy. Today it was also the Super Copper. It wasn't really a transfer, but a free signing. Mbappe, of course, scored. A Jude Bellingham assist. That front line looks absolutely nuts. It looks like a FIFA Ultimate Team. And granted, it's not really an official match. It's a bit of a Mickey Mouse trophy. But that Atalanta side, last time I saw them play, looked really, really good. And against a, let's call them, retooling Madrid. It's definitely not a rebuilding year, but they look very different. It's a different shape, different way of style of playing, and they look really, really scary. So I think that's something to watch out for the entire European continent, not just the Premier League. Fulkrug, after a nice summer and a nice Champions League run, has gone from Dortmund to West Ham, who I think will impress some people this year. Only 27 million quid, not bad. And then Liverpool, as aforementionedly mentioned, assigning a goalkeeper when they have two of the best in the league. I do think Kelleher is really, really, really good, and I say that as a Chelsea fan that have faced him in too many cup finals. Mamardashvili is coming to Liverpool from Valencia, but he's being loaned out, I believe, to Bournemouth or Brighton, one of the Bs. So He's actually not getting bought until next summer officially, but the agreement is there, which is why he's on loan already.
That's a bit of a strange transfer. That I actually had missed that one had come in, but honestly, maybe could have even been like an opportunistic signing. They see this guy's value rising, right? But yeah, just to go back on the Mbappe point, I mean, seeing him score the goal, he does his, celebration. Vinicius pulls up, does the celebration. Rodrigo's doing the celebrations. Bellingham in the distance, assisting the goal. Just like, I mean, just the sheer wealth at Madrid, it can make a man cry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, but that was a roundup of the transfers and some news and notes ahead of the main part of the show, and that is our Premier League predictions. We're going to go through a few categories and kind of give our thoughts on the teams. This will be relegated teams, mid-table disappointments, mid-table surprises, positively, and then we'll go through our top 8 from 8th to 1st. Didn't have this on the show doc, Olan, but I'll also ask you a few predictions on player of the year, young player of the year, breakouts, that sort of thing. But let's get right into it at the bottom end of the table, Olan. Who are your 3 predicted relegated teams this year?
Oh, that's a tough one because, every year you really hope for a bit of a Cinderella story. I know that's an American term, but you really hope one of these newly promoted sides can have a great run. I actually think Leicester won't do too badly. But Ipswich Town, I don't think they're going to have much of a season. And Southampton, I think, are going straight back down. I know Southampton were in the Premier League for quite a while, but it just doesn't seem like they have the level. I'm really curious to see if Everton can hang on this year. I know that they and Nottingham Forest the last couple of years have really struggled in the Premier League to stay up. But I think Sean Dyche can pull a rabbit out of the hat. And I'm going to say Nottingham Forest, with all their investments, will be the 3rd team to go down.
So which of so you think Leicester stay up of the relegated sides?
Yeah, I think Leicester can actually do decently. I know they have a new manager and new pretty much everything, but I have a good feeling about the side.
I see. So I, in fact, will be predicting the Cinderella story. I think Ipswich will stay up under Kieran McKenna, who is, of course, almost a wonderkind of a manager. He was in high demand right when Ipswich were completing their ascension to the Premier League, shall we say. Their key signing this summer, man, you'll be familiar with, is Omari Hutchinson. What can you tell me about him?
Great talent that Chelsea just saw as pure profit at the end of the day. Was fantastic on loan there last year. The one question that I think Chelsea also had about the player was, is he Premier League ready? It's a big jump to go from the Championship to the Premier League. So to really be now the main man, now that he's officially an Ipswich player, will be really interesting. I'm curious to see how Kieran McKenna adapts his playing style. Is he going to play the wide open football we saw in the Championship? It would be brave to do so, but also a little foolish because teams in the Premier League will slice you up if you play that openly.
We almost have 2 comps. One being Daniel Farke and his Norwich sides. That's a team that played extremely expansively and retained that style in the Premier League. Got ripped to shreds and finished 20th, right? The other comp is Chris Wilder's Sheffield United. This is the first time they came up. He had a more solid system with a back 3/5, but he was also a very innovative coach. He had overlapping center backs and whatnot. And I can't recall how they finished the season, but at least when we went to the COVID break, they were around 6th or 8th. So they did pretty well in the first year. I'm tending to think that McKenna follows the Wilder route, and it is a hopium for that kind of Cinderella story, but I'll keep them up. I think Leicester go down. Leicester and both Southampton haven't recruited too well and seem to be struggling to replace some key players. For Southampton, it's Che Adams. For Leicester, it's not just Dewsbury Hall, who did join Chelsea. We haven't really spoken about that one, but he joined Chelsea. They've also lost quite a few veterans, including Schmeichel, Albrighton, and Dennis Pratt, players that Premier League fans will be very familiar of from Leicester. And they've really struggled to replace them because of PSR issues. That's really, a big theme of Leicester going down. And even as they were topping the championship, you just kept hearing about the money issues. Doesn't seem like they've really strengthened the squad. So I'll go Leicester and Southampton. And my last team will be Brentford, who I predict to go down. they've been kind of hanging around. They finished 16th last year. They've been kind of hanging around that spot. You have to, Thomas Frank has done a good job. He kind of does fit into that innovative coach, lower table hire that I did just speak wonders of. And last year they did it without Ivan Toney for half the year, right? This year, so Ivan Toney wants away. Remains to be seen if that happens. It is the last year of his contract, so you would think that Brentford, a club that is built on Moneyball principles, their owner is a guy who's made his fortune in poker, is a very mathematically directional guy. So you would think they want to get Ivan Toney out. They bought their big money signing. Igor Thiago is a forward. He just tore I want to say he tore his ACL, or at least is an injury that's going to keep him out for 5 to 6 months. And I just think this is going to be a case of a team that runs out of steam in their fourth season, the Premier League now. I just don't think they'll have enough quality in spite of the coaching. We saw it happen with Brendan Rodgers' Leicester a couple of years, 2 years ago. That team had more talent on paper and they still went down. So I think Brentford will be my last relegated team.
Shocking. I mean, I definitely didn't see that coming. I think Thomas Frank has a really solid Brentford team. Playing them is never easy. And of all places to go, you never think a bit further than Fulham, going a bit further west. Going to Brentford has been decently tricky over the last couple of years. I think they'll actually still stay up. I do think Nottingham Forest has just spent so recklessly and seems to have no direction as a club that they're doomed to go down. So that's why I picked them over Brentford.
That was the other team that I had under consideration. I mean, not crazy takes from us, 16th and 17th. I would probably rate Frank over Nuno, but I would say Nottingham Forest just have a little bit more of at least a player talent on paper, and that's kind of the decision. But we'll see what happens there. Each of us predicting 2 of the promoted teams to go back down. So let's move on to mid-table disappointment. Who is your candidate for a team finish anywhere from like 9th to 17th that will fail to meet the preseason expectations, shall we say?
I'm not going to ruin it too much, but I'm just going to mention them by name. I think Newcastle end up in the mid-table somewhere, even though they're relatively expected to be top 8. I also think Crystal Palace will actually be in the relegation battle. I don't really see them doing too great. I do think Michael Olise's just ingenuity and dribbling threat will be so sorely missed in this side, especially on counters. I mean, he's just such an electric talent. I think West Ham will actually do quite well this year, so I think I can't really mention them. But I guess to answer the other side of this, I think they will do quite well and surprise people, and I think Fulham are going to surprise some teams this year.
Taking from the start, because I know West Ham was your mid-table surprise, but taking it from the start, my mid-table disappointment was going to be Newcastle. My kind of thinking there is they've done nothing for the squad, the first team in terms of incomings this summer. Really, again, another team that's been strapped by PSR. All they've done really is sell a few young talents. No one really notable, but not brought anyone in. The only completed transfer is Lewis Hall, who's already there at Newcastle last year, right? So I just think in this year of the project, despite having the talents of Isaac and Bruno Guimaraes, who are amongst the better players in the Premier League, top 20, top 25 players in the Premier League, I just think it's going to be that year of the project that the legs run out a little bit. I think we're going to start hearing some noise that Eddie Howe is not the manager to take the team forward. He seems like a manager that does well when he's got the team like fully clicking behind him, right? But he's always felt like a guy that's, underneath punching up rather than, the person that's going to take Newcastle to be the club their ambitions want them to be. So that's just kind of my thinking behind Newcastle being a fade. Do you see some merit in that?
Absolutely. I do think the fact they didn't get Champions League football last year is a bit of a disaster. I think in terms of the economic calculations for PSR, they expected to. They didn't buy the summer because they didn't get the 100 million you get granted for free, basically, once you get into the Champions League. So that's a huge problem for them. And the other thing with Eddie Howe is how much is this England job going to start becoming, let's say, tempting for him?
That's a really good consideration. Of course, there was a bit of England news that the FA finally had approved the possibility of a foreign-born coach. That obviously, brings the idea that it will be a non-Englishman next. But that is Eddie Howe's name is always close to the England job, and on merit, I would say. Just to pick up from your point into mine, Crystal Palace is who I think will be my mid-table surprise. They finished 10th last year, so they're already at the top. They had a phenomenal run in the second half of the year, so people will know they've been on this kind of run. But I just really love the football that Oliver Glasner plays. Olise, huge loss. It cannot be understated. What a fantastic player! It's really a loss for the Premier League that he went abroad. They still retain the services of Eberechi Eze, who was really heavily linked with the move to Spurs. I think he's also a phenomenal player. I think the crown jewel, one of the guys who will be the biggest name on the market next year is Adam Wharton, deep in midfield. This guy is a really, really tasty player. Maybe it was a step too early for him to make significant minutes in the England squad this summer. Kobbie Mainoo may beg to differ, but he's just built different. But Adam Wharton has that kind of he's a very interesting profile. It's not kind of profile that England really produces, that deep lying midfielder who can do a bit of everything, but also have that class on the ball, almost like a Michael Carrick. If I were to comp him to an older player. But that's just kind of my thinking with Crystal Palace, hitting those heights. Maybe, I'd probably get them up until, I don't want to spoil it too early, but I'll probably be talking about them a little later too with my predictions. Feel free to go a little further on Palace if you want, or tell me why you have West Ham as your surprise.
Well, first I'll answer why Palace. I think Mark Guehi's good as gone. Someone's going to pay some really good money for him. It was bound to happen after his European performance this summer. Wharton, I feel like the market is not too hot for him, but I could definitely see him being one of those January transfer window signings if he's really just carrying the team by himself at that point. West Ham, I think they've just recruited really well. Nothing personal against David Moyes, but he does have a tendency to play really boring football, even when he has a decent squad. And West Ham now, with a proper centre forward in Fulcrum, I think with Kudus, they have a lot of players out there that can really play football. We're not sure what's going to happen with Lucas Paqueta. I know that he still has these charges facing him, but if he plays, he's brilliant. Jared Bowen is an England player, so you really have a solid team going forward. So they'll entertain you for sure. I do think that with a few teams dropping off in levels, they'll score just a ton of goals, and because of that, they'll be in the top 10.
I don't think I can disagree with that. Honestly, a reason that West Ham passed me by for this category is because they actually finished 9th last year. So I think the expectations are already pretty high for them. But I definitely see your point. So let's without further ado, let's go one place above 9th. That is the top 8. So tell me who you have finishing in 8th at the moment.
So this is where things will get very, very tricky for me. This is the position I worry about the most. Do I want to be really biased and slag off Man United and say they don't make the top 10? I'm not sure I'm willing to do that.
That would be absurd.
Look, there hasn't been that much change from last year. There are many unproven players in the back line. The forward line really just got rid of Anthony Martial and added Xerxes. So there's a lot of doubts around Manchester United, Rahul. I was debating whether to put them 9th or 8th. I think just for the sake of argument, I'm going to put them at 9th, and I put West Ham at 8th. I think that Erik ten Hag's reign of 2 consecutive trophies will come unceremoniously to an end sometime over winter on a losing streak by the club. I think I have Newcastle at 7th. I don't think Newcastle will improve at all. They're lucky not to regress even, in my opinion. Then at 6, unfortunately, I haven't changed things much from last year's table, but that's just the way it is. As much as I love my Blues, I don't really see them doing too well. I mean, I already see that we have a Conference League match next week, I believe. So the amount of matches this year we're going to play is just going to be insane, seeing as we're going to go far in all cups.
Wait,
Then
before you go on to 5, let's take 6 through 8, because 5 and 4. Well, 5 is like who misses out Champions League. We'll wait on that.
Oh, okay.
You know what? I should have known it was coming, right? Manchester United at 9th. They finished 8th, right? Has much changed? More has changed off the field, right? Than on the field. United played well in the preseason game, in the Community Shield.
The preseason game, yeah.
Which is a preseason game, right? It's only a trophy if you win, right?
Yeah.
I mean, am I kind of hoping that the injury crisis from last year gets better? Of course. United suffered an unbelievable number of injuries.
It's not the injuries that worry me, Rahul. It's your midfield. I mean, you have a boy, you literally have a child in Kobe Mainu, who you're asking him to do the thing he's least good at, which is basically cover the back line. He does everything else amazingly. This is the one flaw in his game, and this is the thing the club's asking of him, because he has a 32, I believe, year-old Casemiro who's lost his legs, and then you got Mason Mount. So that.
No. I mean, and the midfield, who will play next to Mainu? Huge hole. A hole that has not been addressed. We've talked about Manuel Ugarte as a potential target. Seems like that move has floundered some sparks, but doesn't seem like it'll be happening. It's just too out of our price range. Talk about Onana. Not Onana.
The other
Fofana. Yusuf Fofana from close enough. Fofana. And there's also been Sander Berg from Burnley. So it looks like we're moving on to cut rate kind of players. Any of those would be an improvement on Casemiro. So we do need to see a player come in, and I expect a player to come in that position. So maybe my prediction was taken with that. I think United will finish 5th this season. Is the take that I'm going to go with.
Who is you signing? Seedorf?
Okay. So it's one position in midfield, right? But I think the problem itself, without knowing who United are going to sign, the problem itself is going to get better by actual center backs playing in center back positions, including Martinez, who's one of the better players that we have. De Ligt. Neither of them, while as you said earlier, both of them complement each other well. Neither of them are too pacey. De Ligt has almost put on too much muscle to be that kind of sweeper. So that is a worry for me with the style that United want to play. But just having the solidity of those two, I think, will help the team a lot. For me, and the point in your denouncement of United that I did agree with is the potential of Ten Hag losing a few games over winter and losing his job. Very much on the cards. We've seen how spectacularly things can break apart at Manchester United, but I gotta keep going in on Ten Hag. The tactics are still a big question for me, man. For me, it was still tactical more than even injuries that I would blame for how poorly we played last season. Remains to be seen, but on the positive side, I do like the moves we've made. I predict really big breakouts for both Amad Diallo on the right and Alejandro Garnacho on the left. I think both of them are primed to take a step forward. I don't know if Højlund is going to have the season we all want him to have, but signing of Xerxes is very interesting because we talked about him, right? But he's more of an enabler kind of forward. He's going to let the other players play. And with Garnacho, with Mount, definitely with Bruno, all of them are great at making runs in behind. And that's the kind of forward that will let that happen. Bruno Fernandes did just sign a long-term deal at United today as well. So there's a little bit more positivity for me. I'm going to go with United at 5th. So I already kind of
I have a question.
Yeah.
If they're 5th, who is the leading scorer, A? And B, do they have more than Nico Jackson's 14 Premier League goals?
I would love to say Alejandro Garnacho gets 15.
So you think Garnacho really goes nuts? For lack of a better word, you basically expect him to go to fucking insane. 15 goals, like 8 assists. You see him just running wild.
I think so. And my reason for that is Garnacho had a fantastic first year, right? It's kind of a year zero, you could almost call it. He broke into the team and mainly was a sub. Last year, he started the season well and then really tailed off in the latter half of the year. But this
Got
came,
tired. Yeah.
yeah, this came amid. He was poor in the second half of last year.
But he just had no legs. You could tell. In the
He
FA Cup,
had
it was
no legs.
different, but he
Yeah.
had no legs. He just had
He
no
had
legs.
no legs. He made 35 consecutive starts. He had to run the bloody beep test up and down the field. And I think, this comes with a bit of projecting that United will be better, will control the ball more, will play higher up the field. It's going to have to reduce the distance that Garnacho's little legs need to run up and down. And I think that's going to make him much more explosive. In tandem with that, obviously, I mentioned Ahmad and Garnacho. That means we finally have kind of, remains to be seen if it's Premier League high, pushing that level performance. But Rashford, Sancho, Antony behind them, another striker in the mix. Mount can play both wings. I think there'll be just a little bit more depth, and that's kind of why I'm projecting better seasons from those two wingers.
Fair enough. So who'd you have at 8, 7, and 6?
Yeah, thank you for the transition. So 8. I mean, see, I gave you the grace of 8, okay? I have Chelsea at 8. And hey, man, if I wanted to go in, I could have gone lower, but I think 8. I think 8's fair. And let me just tell you my reasons. And this is as an outsider, right? So it's real. I'm really looking to you for your kind of guidance on this take. I just think Chelsea have had the worst summer possible with all the coherence has never been there with transfers, right? But it's really been hard to see a tangible plan. These youth players, being pushed out, transfers falling through. Neto, we've talked about Neto, but then there's a whole Enzo Fernandez thing at the start of the summer. It's been quashed. Reece James again injured, and then when you just think about all that, and then go for Enzo Maresca as a coach, unproven at the top level, really only had a successful season in the championship. And besides that has been, just an assistant manager to, of course, at Man City, but still, I just don't have too much faith that this is a team that's going to be able to punch above all that kind of chaos. Cole Palmer is a top 5 player in the league. He proved that last year. He will continue to prove that this year, but I just don't think Chelsea will have enough to, you have them at 6th, right? I don't think they'll have enough to push above 6th. And I kind of see them tailing off more towards the bottom there. So let me pause. And what do you think? Chaos. What do you think about the summer that Chelsea's had? Even the preseason results were really poor, right?
Yeah, only one win, right? And you can tell the club is once again in turmoil. Things are changing rapidly. Players are coming in and out. The last few summers, the one positive I will say is that we've made a decent amount of money and we've cut off a lot of the deadwood. The issue is we seem to keep adding potential deadwood. Now, let me turn a question to you, because then you'll understand my analogy. How old were you when you started playing manager mode on FIFA?
Ooh, 2006. So it's probably 9. Let's say.
Yeah, mine was also FIFA 06. Back then, I would basically buy too many players and try to loan them out. And often I would get stuck with a lot of players and a lot of them would get angry, especially in later FIFAs like 12, 13, 14, when even your best player would get mad over nothing and say, I want to leave. Every time you bought someone, basically, right?
Yeah.
It really feels like the owners are those 12-year-olds, those 9-year-olds playing FIFA. They're hoarding players, trying to loan them out, and basically, like you just said, don't have a plan.
Yeah, for me, it's just that kind of chaos that has me placing Chelsea at the bottom of the top 8. In 7th, I have Crystal Palace as my mid-table surprise. I won't go too much into them again. In 6th, I put United 5th, didn't I? Oh God! Now it's time. It's call my shot time. United in 5th. Aston Villa falling out of the top 4 into 6th, and it's really as surface level as this is going to be. It's the addition of those midweek Champions League games, those games where you're going to have to play your best team. Now, both of us really did like the business they've done. I think both Onana and Ian Maatsen are going to be phenomenal signings for them. It's really a question of will their best 15 players have enough in them to go week in, week out, twice a week, when those 3 games in 6 days pile up, when you're having to go, away to Barcelona on a Wednesday, and then you're playing lunchtime kickoff at Anfield on a Saturday, right? Will they have that? I have a bit of a soft spot for Aston Villa, I'll say, but in this ranking, I have them at 6th. I know you have them a little bit higher. So where do you have Aston Villa?
I actually have them at 4th. I was thinking of putting Spurs at 4, but Spurs are going to do the Spursy thing of at the end of the season, they're going to bottle it and finish 5th. That's how I see it. I think everyone kind of expects that out of Villa to kind of do a Newcastle, go into the Champions League, and even if you get eliminated in the first round, or in the group stage, sorry, you just can't. Your squad can't cope. They've signed a couple players. They're doing that trade with Juventus. I'm not sure if it's a trade, if it's separate cash deals. They got Ross Barkley, so clearly they're aware their squad needs a bit more depth. I'm not so much worried about them. I think Spurs are going to have the same issue they had last year. James Maddison's going to get hurt. Sonny's not going to play a full season at 100%. And Richarlison's Richarlison. So I don't see them, even though I rate Ange quite highly as a manager, I still think it's 4 and 5 for Aston Villa and Spurs, the same as last year.
Interesting. So I had, and we'll go on to the kind of last team in the mix because I can guess who the top 2 is not too much of a surprise. I had Spurs at 3rd and Liverpool at 4th. For me with Spurs, I think it's a question of continuity that we don't see with any of those other teams, that are really going to contend for those spots. Aston Villa, yes, but I explained the complication for me with them. So I think Spurs will take that step up and finish in 3rd. But now, kind of just like thinking through this, it's going to be a very poor 3rd. I think it wouldn't be even shocking to me if it's like a 72 to 75 point 3rd place team. And we have a lot of teams in almost that cluster. The team I then, left out there is Liverpool beating United to 4th. Hopefully it doesn't happen this way. But in spite of the lack of transfer business, looking at Liverpool have done really well in preseason, and I did watch them dismantle really United 3-0 in our preseason game, and I was very impressed with how they played. Does Salah have another one in the tank? Who knows? Is he going to be able to respond and reach that level at this age on that money without Jurgen Klopp? Who knows? But I don't know. I think they're just going to have enough in Salah, Van Dijk, and Alisson around with some nice auxiliary pieces to finish in 4th. Spurs 3rd, United 5th, Villa 6th, just to round that up. But yeah, what do you think about Liverpool, who finished 3rd in your rankings, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you said, it's going to be a very low-scoring 3rd spot. I actually think Liverpool's going to do quite bad this season, but hear me out. Towards the very last few, let's say 5, 6, 7, 8 matches of the season, this group of players is going to realize for a lot of them it's their last stand. They're going to pull one last little Liverpudlian kind of Jurgen Klopp-esque run of 8 straight winning matches towards the end of the season to finish 3rd, to kind of leapfrog over the Spursy Spurs and Aston Villa, who will just be kind of overwhelmed by that part of the year. So I do see them ending in kind of not so much a whimpering 3rd, but a far off 3rd, let's just say.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, if I had to give a points tally, 3rd to 6th is probably separated by like a matter of 5 points, right? So at that point, anyone really can make it. That's how close we anticipate it to be this year for those Champions League spots. I don't know if it's probably too early to say. England, of course, did not get the 5th Champions League spot that many were projecting. It actually went to Italy instead. So I don't know how that may shake out this year. Far too early for us to really worry about those kind of things. But let's move on to the top 2. So we don't need to start with 2. Well, let's go right to the champion. Who do you think will win the Premier League this season?
I think, unfortunately, the bold man, despite the fact that in February, let's all hope and pray all their titles get stricken. I think they're going to win the league again, unless, like I hope and pray for every night before bed, they do get, points deducted or, I guess, titles voided. In which case, I guess morale will just shoot and Arsenal might finally have a chance to win it. But I do think City win it again, and I think Rodri finally wins Player of the Year.
Yeah, I was honestly undecided going into this, but really hearing you speak how matter of fact it's been for the last 4 years, 4 in a row. God damn, if they make it 5,
7. Let's be honest. Apart from the COVID year, it's kind of been just
it's Pep
calming.
Guardiola. I mean, since since it was won by Chelsea under Antonio Conte, it's really been the Guardiola era with one Liverpool title, right? Let's
COVID title.
COVID. I will march the flag on the asterisk for their title, but let's admit that it was totally wrapped up.
Well, we just got to say it, fuck the Scousers. I'll openly say it on the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, they waited 30 years for a title and could not even have an open top parade. The title, the crown was snatched for them before fans could come back and see that team. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we've kind of seen how the Premier League goes. Now, City have not made any really major transfers. Besides the Julian Alvarez going out, the only incoming was Savinho, player already in the City kind of farm system. But, a very good player. One we touched on in our first episode when we went on about Girona. Just news coming out today is Oscar Bob, promising young winger, just fractured his leg, will be out for 5 months. And especially, I mean, really a shame. He really impressed me. I hadn't watched him too much, but impressed me in the Community Shield. And now in that position, are they light with Julian Alvarez and now Bob out? Not really, if you just think about all the talent you have. Yeah.
In midfield, they do have some issues, though, because Calvin Phillips is as good as either gone or just non-existent at this point because he doesn't play. Joao Cancelo, I think, is back. He should be, right?
He is, yeah.
I'm not sure if he's going to play. You have Rico Lewis. There's actually a decent amount of question marks. When was the last time Manchester City really bought someone? That was Doku, and then before that it was Haaland. So they've let a lot of players go over the past couple of years, but haven't brought that many in. Of course, there's a scrutiny from the Premier League with those funds that they used in the first place. But from a football standpoint, purely, the squad doesn't look very deep.
It doesn't look deep, and that's why I think the Bob injury is quite significant because Lewis had already kind of broken too, but him and James McAtee, there's one more midfielder who started the game, but I think those two especially were kind of tipped to make steps into the first team squad, so that's going to be a miss. But let me turn the question over to Arsenal then. I mean, City's a winning machine. It might just be because City are City, but how do you kind of project this Arsenal season going?
Well, first of all, I just can't believe we're talking about Manchester Academy products and their respective injuries being kind of important to the Manchester City squad
right.
season. That's insane, isn't it? Arsenal, I feel like, are very close and have been, as Arteta will tell you, to beating City. They just need that certain edge. I'm not sure if they found it. It's really hard when you're in Arsenal's position to get that transfer, to get you guys over the top. Now, what would you say Arsenal need to beat City? Really, it's just a number 9, right? It's a classic centre forward, which basically every team needs. There's no one on the market, even the highest, I guess, quoted striker, which is Osimhen. Like, he's not worth it, and he just doesn't fit the style of play that Arsenal has. So it's a really tricky situation. You need Gabriel Jesus and Kai Havertz to have really, really quality seasons because there doesn't seem to be much of an alternative.
Jesus, yes, but that's the one that there might be the biggest disconnect in the expectations of Arsenal fans and, regular watchers around the world, pretty much anyone else with eyes. I don't want to bash the lad too much because Havertz does have some numbers. Allegedly, he's played well. I wouldn't be able to back that up myself.
Second half of last season, he scored some goals, sure, but he's not a Premier League winning 9. It's that simple.
He's not. And it's just the fact that they spent, 62 million pounds around that on Kai Havertz, started him like he was supposed to be that kind of 8, right? Like the Xhaka replacement, and now he's
And
like
he was doing well, I thought. I thought he was doing well. He really had to play 9 out of necessity. Gabriel
yeah.
Jesus every offseason, kind of like Onana did this year, is like, you haven't seen nothing yet. Get ready because I'm going to play well. And then he gets hurt. So, I mean, I've kind of given up on Jesus personally. And Ketsia seems to be going as well. So it just looks like they
They're
need
gonna be
to buy a
short a
striker
few
anyway.
goals. Yeah, because Arsenal took 4 points off City, and in fact, fans would honestly most criticize Arteta's approach in the game away at Etihad, where they played for a point. They took 4 points off City, could have been 6, but they finished 2 points behind them in the end, right? So it's really a game here or there
It's the Aston
elsewhere
Villa loss. They just went to Villa, and Villa was
at
fighting.
home. That was at
It
the
was.
Emirates.
Oh, I thought it was in Birmingham.
Ollie
Oh
Watkins
wow.
at the Emirates, boyhood Arsenal fan, put the dagger through their heart. I think I kind of agree with you, but if there is, and I mean, I hope this Arsenal run ends as soon as possible, as miserably as possible. But you have to give plaudits when plaudits are due, right? That's why we're doing this show. They're a good squad that's set up for the future, but if you have to think there's a year that it could happen, it could be this one when those kind of chinks are appearing in the City armor in terms of squad depth, in terms of the age of a De Bruyne, a Bernardo, a Kyle Walker and such are on the wrong side of 30. That's
Pep
kind
might
of
be
where.
leaving, the sanctions. I mean, you're completely right, man. Arsenal, in that case, they need to be like Chelsea 10 years ago and just be top of the table from day one and just don't even give City the chance to go on one of those mad runs and catch up.
But isn't that exactly what's happened in the last 2 years? Arsenal have topped the table from day one up until, say, game week 32, when City in December kick into gear, go on that run, and inevitably take everyone in their wake, right? That's just what City kind of do. And I
Well,
think
the
that's.
issue this year was Arsenal was almost perfect. I mean, even I remember at the beginning of the year, they kept scoring and winning games 5-0, 6-0.
Mhm.
It's just that slip up against Villa. They can't afford to do things like that. It's a lot of it is just going to be in here. And mentally, is the squad ready to take on what is arguably one of the greatest Premier League teams of all time, if not the greatest?
Yeah, and just the last point, I mean, I agree with you completely. And just the last point for me on that is the fact that they still put together a 95-point season, like Arsenal's best Premier League season, most winning season in Arsenal history together, a year after bottling the title when they were even further ahead and dropped like 3 or 4 games in April. That almost kind of gives me confidence. If I was an Arsenal fan, I'd be confident in them being able to do it again. Whereas if they had fallen off last year, that's when you can say, like, oh, do they have that kind of mentality to keep up with a winning machine? They almost did it twice. It could be their year. So let me ask you again, are we sticking with City 1, Arsenal 2?
Yeah, I mean, conversely, you can also argue, is that the peak? Is that as high as that Arsenal team can go?
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't seem like Saka, unless Saka takes it to a completely new level, is going to play much better. It seems that Martinelli was better last year, or I guess 2 years
2 years.
ago, than last year. Does Odegaard have even another level where he starts adding double-digit goals and assists? Does Kai Havertz score maybe 20 Premier League goals? You really need everyone to just take a pretty sizable step up. So the question can also be, with these players being the age they are, is this as far as the team can go? Because, I mean, it's already a remarkable height. Let's not kid ourselves. 95 points in the modern Premier League that's a great team.
I mean, phenomenal, right? It's probably the second highest losing total ever, only behind the
The
Liverpool
Liverpool,
team.
yeah, against
Yeah,
the same bloody Manchester City side. It's just
get these guys out of here. I
we just
mean,
need
but
the sanctions, and we need Pep to become the England manager so that we can actually win a trophy.
yeah, I mean, but it's an interesting point you bring up about the ceiling because one, to agree with you, the defense already, Arsenal's defense last year was one of the staunchest in the league already, right? And they didn't win the title. They did, of course, bring in Ricardo Calafiori, but how much better can they get? But the other point to disagree, I guess, is when you still look at the age profiles that they have, Saliba, Saka, Martinelli, and co are all younger. It's perhaps they have another step to reach. It's hard to say, but I think I will agree with you. Man City won. Man City will win their 5th Premier League title in a row, and Arsenal forever the belle of the what's the word? Forever the bridesmaid, not the bride. There we go. Bell. What the hell? We'll finish second. But that was our Premier League predictions. We're just about an hour mark, so let me go through these last ones a little quickly. Olan, who is your prediction for Premier League Player of the Year?
Well, I think City win it, and I think Rodri once again is the anchor in that and finally gets the recognition he deserves.
Yeah, no, you mentioned that earlier. Yeah, I wouldn't be too surprised. Oh, that's kind of boring though, huh? Let me. Man, I'm gonna hate myself even more, but I'm gonna say Mo Salah wins Premier League Player of the Year by dragging this Liverpool team to 4th. He is gonna just go on one of the a legacy campaign. 25 plus goals.
28 goals, yeah, I can see it.
This is one of those where he's like an absolute like FPL monster, right? He bags.
Oh, you know what? Actually, I couldn't agree more. I might actually have to agree with you. The streets are gonna remember, but not bald, but like shaved head.
Yeah.
That's actually
Bro
a
was
streets
thugging this summer.
player.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Like we have an icon in the making, so I'll agree with you.
That's facts. That's facts. All right. What about Young Player of the Year?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, there's a lot of
And let me just say, sorry to interrupt you, but let me just say I don't like the Young Player of the Year award because it considers players who are 23 at the start of the year. They're players who've been playing for like 5 years of professional football and are still eligible. Please, Premier League, do away with that rule. Make it U21. I think that would bring some credence to it. Rant aside, who's your prediction for Young Player of the Year?
I think a man who almost ended up at United but would have cost as much as 2 Bayern Munich players. I think Everton will really need him because Branthwaite is going to have to shore up that back line and hope they can stay up. James Trafford is another name that comes to mind for me. I would love for it to be one of the Chelsea lads, but I'm actually going to go with someone we mentioned earlier. If it's not Branthwaite, I guess he's my 1B, but my 1A would be Adam Wharton. I think if he's eligible, I think he still is.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to be sensational for Palace, and he's going to have to be from the get-go.
Full agreement here on Adam Wharton being that Player of the Year, especially if Palace pushes and finishes in 7th, right? It'll be hard to see it happen without the prowess of Adam Wharton. If I had to give a biased one, I mentioned Garnacho, potential 15-goal season, but I do have to shout out Amad Diallo. This is a guy that United fans everywhere have been crying out for years. I mean, this guy was signed by United. The deal was completed in like August 2020. He joined the club in Jan 2021, scored 1 goal against AC Milan as a sub, and then, barely had a minute on the field at Manchester United. Scored that famous goal against Liverpool, barely had a minute after that. A lot of the quotes coming out this season from Ten Hag have been, this is the year of Amad Diallo. He was our best player on preseason. That's not really a good barometer, but he played well. I think Diallo is going to have a breakout campaign. He's a very lovely player. I'm not sure how much of him have you watched. I'd comp him to a Bernardo Silva type. I really like him, the way he instantly controls the ball on the right flank with his left and is straight towards goal. He's always attacking goal, and I think that's a great trait in players. That sometimes in the Pep Guardiola era, you don't see that too much anymore. They're always turning back and passing sideways, but if I had to give a shout out, my 1B, my biased 1B is Amad Diallo. 1A, I agree with you. Adam Wharton is Premier League Young Player of the Year.
I will have this final question, and then I guess we can wrap up. Does that mean these 2 young players are going to spell doom for Sancho and Rashi?
Sancho, yes. I mean, honestly, I'm still open to selling Sancho. This summer, body language has been bad. His attitude, application does not seem to be there. On top of the fact that he just does not seem to have the pace for the Premier League. I think Sancho's not there. Rashford is the interesting one. I am very curious to see him play with Joshua Zirkzee. Rashford's best form has always come alongside Anthony Martial, who in a way became a very similar type of forward, the one that dropped deep and linked play up. Very silky player, so he could unlock the best out of Rashford. But I think what we saw in the Community Shield, Rashford missing 2 sitters in what I would say is a improved game from what we saw last year. I thought he was a lot more careful with the ball, but missing those chances, I think it's only a matter of time before both Garnacho and Ahmad are demanding those starting spots, and who knows what will happen. I mean, Rashford's really a hard topic, right? It's almost an undiscussable topic on like United Spaces because people have such strong opinions about him. I wish nothing but for the best from a player, and hopefully that best comes at United. But I think at 26, and admittedly he is younger than us both, we know barely. This is the first player I ever saw play for United younger than me. He's born Halloween 97 is his birthday. But at this point, we kind of know the player that he is. He's always going to be streaky, and I think
he broke out 10 years ago. The same guy.
Literally almost. He broke out in the 15-16 campaign. His first game was like Feb 2016. So literally getting to that point. It's not going to change too much. So I just see those two overtaking him, if that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. It's a bit sad to see 2 English players kind of fall by the wayside and probably have to go to PSG or something. But
yeah. And United have really been that kind of graveyard of talent for the last decade. It's
trust me, we know how you feel. We know how you feel now.
So there you have it, folks. That was the Premier League predictions from the one to come back to us in 9 months' time, where we're inevitably proved. Hey, I won't say wrong. We were pretty good for a bit on the Euros, but that was the Premier League predictions. As always, Olan, it's been a blast. Any last words for the people?
I know that my picks have been rather conservative, but that's only because I expect not a boring Premier League, but a really high-scoring Premier League. And in higher-scoring seasons, the better teams on average tend to just kind of fit where they're supposed to, just because they have more squad depth. I think we're really getting to a spot in the sport where there's just too many games. Unions are starting to complain about FIFA, about maybe UEFA in a few years with these expanded Champions Leagues. So we'll see. I think player fatigue is really going to play into that, and thus bigger squads are going to pull through.
That is a great analysis, especially on the back of summer tournaments, the Olympics, a lot of football, U.S. tours for
the COVID cycle.
That's a very prudent point, but I hope we see some glowing football instead. The Premier League is back, baby. This has been the 1-2. I didn't introduce myself. Rahul, you can find me on Twitter at SmallTalkFF. That is, of course, my co-host Olan. Thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you in the next one.